Welcome everyone to our last webinar of the year, the last PRIA webinar of the year, Growth Reimagined in 2021, or we hope so. And I'm delighted today to be joined by two giants of the PR world, Andy Lark and Chris Savage. Gents, welcome to you both.
Thanks, Lee.
Lovely to have you on board. Look, 2020 was a challenging year for many businesses, including PR. Nobody welcomed it, we all know that, but if the glass is half full, has this now given us an opportunity to reset our approach to PR and reposition our impact as practitioners? What do you think?
I'll kick off, Andy, with a couple of comments. Look, I really loved something I read in the trade press a couple of days ago from Harold Mitchell, who's the famous media media agency guy, who said that in his business, and he built a hugely successful business, the three most critical triggers that accelerated his growth, that built the success, was the stock market crash of 87, 9/11, and the GFC. And he said, you know, it was in those environments that as a business leader, you just had to move quicker, more decisively, be more consistent in what you did. And they even though it was sort of a time of crisis, conditions were perfect for businesses to reset and recalibrate. So I think, yes, it is a good time for businesses to do exactly that, to get much more in our industry, whether you're an in-house team or whether you're an agency, align our activities far more closely with relevant commercial outcomes. I know Andy's got a strong point of view about lead generation and demand and those sort of things, and he can speak much more authoritatively about that, but commercial outcomes. Number two, I think COVID has really, one of those critical things in COVID has been communications, internal, with the share market, external, supply chains. I mean, never before has communications been as critical, as relevant, as central to business success as it has been during COVID. And during this period as well. I mean, in terms of some of the things that we do, like reputation management, it's been absolutely critical. Some businesses have done very well in that regard, and others have not done as well. So I think it has been a great opportunity for businesses and executives in our industry to reset, and many have fallen by the wayside too, because they just weren't good enough they weren't strong enough, good enough to navigate the setbacks and come out with new strength. Andy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think people down in Australia tend to know me as a CMO, not a chief communications officer, but I spent more than half my life inside the PR agency world, both running my own agencies and building them as a managing partner at Flash from Halal globally, and then also as a chief communications officer for very big brands. So I have I'm a recovering PR person, as I like to say. What I'd say is, look, there are a large number of agencies and internal communicators who have really done it tough this year. And it doesn't mean they're bad at their jobs. I know dedicated PR agencies in the travel and tourism and hospitality sector who, they're dead. They're trying to recover now, they're trying to rebuild, they're trying to reopen. So it's been a very tough year in some elements of the sector. And talking to some of the folks I know in LA early this morning, I mean, they're washed out completely. I mean, LA's all but shut down. They've got no business flowing, even at the higher end of the market. So what it has really emphasized to me is the agencies and the professionals who have been able to center themselves with more diversified practices. So they aren't, it's really going to challenge this notion of pure industry specialization. And I think where we're seeing the majority of growth on the agency and consulting side is either at the upper end of town in crisis, corporate communications, and then in the diversified agencies or the agencies concentrated in sectors which have been relatively immune to any kind of shifts such as tech. But I think if you look at the broader trend that spans both in-house and agency, this idea that the spectrum of communications is broadening rapidly, right? And it's simple to look at it and say, look, you know, oh yeah, we're all going to generate content and we're all going to be, you know, in the deeper social game of content generation, of video, of all these other things, all these other influence tactics, if you like. But I think the ones that are experiencing the growth have not only diversified across industry sectors, and I think there's a ton tech and B2B agencies can benefit from in dealing with consumer FMCG concentrated agencies, for instance, but also those that have been able to really diversify their portfolio across a broader spectrum of tactical. Their tactical toolbox has sort of got much larger, and they've actually got as much revenue flowing out of content management, content generation, customer engagement, around demand generation, around event management, around a whole spectrum of other tactics that might have been left to marketing, B2B marketing agencies. It could have been left to ad agencies. It could have been left to others. And I actually think, I know one of my peers, if you like, in the industry made a grand statement early in the year that PR is too important to be left to PR firms. Well, I think creative is too important to be left to ad agencies. So
Andy, can I jump in there and ask you a question?
Yep.
Because I'm fascinated. You talk about basically the successful operators having, more in their bag of tricks, as it were. So if you're sitting here today listening to this and you've run a fairly traditional PR agency, how do you begin to add those skill sets? Is it about retraining your troops? Is it about bringing in outsiders? How do you actually tackle that from a pragmatic?
Well, the mistake I see too many agencies making, and I hire agencies all year round for different assignments and use them on different things, is they tend to start way too junior. The great world we live in today means if you think PR does it tough, well, try being a journalist. There is a lot of journalists out of work. There's a lot of great writers out of work. And so the smart agencies are actually bringing in very, very good talent from those other professions, the storytelling professions, if you like, and they're not bringing them in to do PR. They're bringing them in to generate great content. They're bringing them in to engage audiences through other tactics, and whether that's through video, whether that's through written narrative, whatever it might be. They're getting very, very smart at that. But the best ones, what they're doing, the ones I go to most, they're bringing in senior talent to begin with and building the portfolio around them. The ones I see struggling to do it, they've hired, very, very good young talent, but they don't have the expertise yet in storytelling. They don't have the knowledge of how brands work. They don't have the knowledge of how companies function, and they just don't have the subtle writing and storytelling skills yet. So I think that's one technique. The second thing I would say is I'm seeing the very best PR firms getting quite adept at understanding the MarTech stack. So they're actually getting a really good comprehension of being able to look at Google Analytics and talk to a client about which articles are generating the most traffic, right? And you do basic math. I'm just going to look up some numbers because they were fascinating numbers. Where I was sitting with a PR firm who had lost a client on the content side, and I said, okay, so this is a UK PR firm, and I said, okay, so your organic social specialist cost you say £25,000, £30 a year, doing about 12 posts a week. They have an average reach of 3,500 to 4,000 per post. So they're reaching about 1.8 million, views per year. Now, if you factor in frequency, misreporting, fake views, that's a CPM in marketers' terms around 30 quid. That's 1/3 more expensive than a TV ad on a CPM basis, right? So I think that the smart firms aren't just looking at, oh, look, we've done this wonderful article. They're looking at the technology stack and saying, how can we actually understand customer engagement and what are the economics of storytelling in this business? And they're getting really savvy at meeting the tech stack where you can track customer engagement over time and really quantifying that for clients. And when you do that for clients, they're like, oh my God, this is fantastic.
Chris, I think Andy raises a really interesting point. And I'm not telling anybody how to suck eggs, but if we're going to relook at the industry for 2021, is it about being much more business savvy rather than resting, as it were, on our creative laurels? You actually have to understand the business and understand their bottom line.
You do. You do. I mean, just picking up on something Andy said, I am a fan of specialization. And I think what I mean by that is I like PR agencies or PR executives that are specialized either in an industry sector. So you'll see agencies that are in, as Andy said, tech, or they're in pharma, or they're in health and wellness, or they're in an element of tech, say fintech. I like that. I also like capability specialized, so investor and financial, corporate relations, or public affairs. I think, depth of expertise does lead you to more relevant roles within organizations. I think that, one of the things I was saying to you earlier, Lee, before we came on air, was that the agencies that I'm involved in, which are creative agencies, digital, and a number of PR firms that I'm a shareholder in and chairman of, they have all had their best ever months in November, best ever. They're all hit by COVID, but they've come out of it. So when I think about 2021, I take the lessons that we've learned out of 2020. What's driven the growth? And I think number one is, as we came out of COVID, we didn't think about restarting our businesses the way we were doing it before COVID. We actually said we're going to start again. What's changed? What's different? And a number of our clients are going to markets through different channels, or they really have digitalized and transformed their customer experience and all that sort of thing. Or the pressures from stakeholders have changed from what they were before, or the sort of services they need from us are different. So we're thinking about restarting again in terms of bringing the best from the old, the best from the new. And that's now also going to apply in terms of how you run your business, whether you have everybody back in the office, or what, how you leverage the best of work from home, with the realities that it's in our business, you like to be able to train in real time, hear people on the telephone, talking to clients and all those sort of things.
Chris, can I just jump in there, because I think that's really fascinating. When you say those companies all had a fabulous November, was that because at some point in the months before that, they did actually do that reset in terms of going, the COVID environment is different, we have to be different? Is that? Well,
I think that the behaviors that we adopted and right consistently across all these businesses were, number one, we became hyper client focused. We completely focused on our existing clients. We were hyper focused. We were feedback junkies. We were completely focused on solving problems. We didn't look for budgets, we looked for problems to solve, and we were nimble and agile. And we might have been talking to them last week about a blue campaign, but then as we talked to them this week, they said, actually our problems become yellow, then we throw out blue and we deal with yellow. So we were very, very hyper client focused. We also got very money focused. We became brilliant custodians of our clients' budgets. We were very ROI focused. We managed budgets. We reduced costs on the things that we did that were commoditized and not really adding value. And we held our costs and increased costs on the things that we were bringing particular value, new value to in the environment we were in. So we became brilliant at managing money. And we also got much more commercial in the way that we talk to our clients. We learned very quickly what are the metrics they care about. Yeah. And so we've got to stop talking about metrics they just don't care about. What are the things that we do that they really care about? Stop trying to sell them stuff that they don't, that's really not mission critical to them right now. And the final thing, I think, in terms of what drove the resurgence of these businesses was that we became creatively led in everything we did. And I don't care whether the business was an issues management business or whether it was, launching products in health and wellness. Everything we did, from the way we managed Zooms to the way we presented work, we took out anything that slowed the path to creativity. So anything, and we stopped presenting finished, polished work to our clients. We showed them work in progress, and said, "Is this?" And so therefore they were able to buy things, and there was a lot of co-creation, co-invention between us and our clients, and we became very much part of their team and part of their thinking. So, and the other thing I think is very important, and a big message for 2021, sell small, bite-sized pieces of work. Don't go in and try and sell a 12-month campaign, because most clients can only see 3 months ahead. In New South Wales yesterday, the COVID broke out again on the North Shore. Is that going to blow up? We don't know, right? So just take 100-day views, 100-day sprints, and sell bite-sized pieces of work, you know, a $40,000 phase one, get some results on the board, get approval for phase two. Work within your clients' budget approval levels. You know, we had our clients, and many of them had their budget approval levels lowered, but we might be dealing with a product manager that could approve a $20,000 spend, but a number of them. So we kept our projects under those levels, right, rather than them having to go upstream. So I think that's what drove the success of, you know, and it's not just the businesses I'm involved in. I talked to a lot of people in the industry, and as Andy said, some businesses are stuffed, you know, because they're in the wrong sector and they just hasn't come back yet. Some are really hurting because they didn't respond in the right way. But many in our industry, while overall over the 12 months, they might be down on last year, they're finishing this 12-month period strongly, and they're optimistic about next year, even though you know, there is a lot of uncertainty. And I think one final point is when I think about 2021, and we're going to talk later, I hope we're going to talk a bit about purpose and about authenticity and all these words that are used. The bottom line is that we have such a critical role in helping our companies, our clients, or if you're internal team, your company, from making mistakes. You've gone out there with all your statements about purpose and CSR and all these good things. Stop them making mistakes in the way, the language they use, the actions they take. There are some really great examples in the last 12 months of companies that got it wrong. You know, and I don't think there are a lot of people out there that buy products because the company's doing the right things, because they just, you know, I think that's a table stakes. They don't buy products because companies have done the wrong things. And our role is to help protect, anticipate, look around corners, and safeguard and keep our organizations, let's say, honest in the way that we're behaving. Absolutely. That's, I think, very, very big.
Chris, can I take your point and throw it to you, Andy? Because to have that sort of influence, you have to have that, you know, a seat at the top table. And not every PR practitioner gets there. And, you know, if you're not part of the conversation, you know, you can't really sway the conversation. So what's the key to getting that so-called seat at the top table?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and I'd start with, I think I'm a real believer in multiple truths. So I think everything Chris has said is true, but I'd add another truth, and that is, you know, I've been around the PR profession for, God, I'm showing my age now, over 30 something years. And it's just so disillusioning to me, because I think PR is one of the most important disciplines in any marketer's toolkit. I think it's fundamental to managing a business's reputation and sort of compass. I think it is one of the most important things a company must master. You wouldn't know it, right? Because PR has not elevated its strategic dialogue within the business. It's seen as a bunch of people who do press releases and, you know, set up meetings and organize TV interviews and do whatever.
That's exactly my point.
But they're not seen as people who guide the strategic intent of the business. So my biggest hope is that, first of all, the PR industry actually stands up for itself, and PR and communicators really stand up for themselves and what PR is, and they stop embracing concept cars and they get to the truth of what PR is about. They stop talking about, you know, reputation and trust and all this stuff, because that's just weasel words to a business leader, right? I actually want it's important, but look, I'm dealing with a balance sheet and I'm dealing with real customers and people who pay me money. So I'm really hoping that PR really starts to find its mojo again. That includes taking back your bloody industry associations and running them. It includes standing up to these agency folks who can't differentiate between publicity and PR and IR and employee comms and all the other sub-disciplines. It's time to fight for what PR actually is and stop sort of the nonsense. I think the second thing is you've got to be able to engage in a business dialogue. And you've got to be focused. You've got to have the courage to build the relationships. I see too many PR leaders internally almost avoiding the CMO, or worse still, pretending they should be the CMO, which they're not skilled or trained or equipped to do. It doesn't mean they're not good people, but this notion of, I don't think you need, it'd be great if you can get a seat at the top table, don't get me wrong. But the reality is you need horizontal relationships across the top of a business. You've got to build horizontally. because if you aren't able to build the conversation and the dialogue with the CFO, the CMO, the COO, the heads of business units. The heads of business units are much more important than being at the C-level table because they actually control budget. And when you look at the typical budget of a CMO, if I'm spending, say, $200 million a year in Australia in my aggregate marketing budget, which the top 50 companies probably are in that range, you know, you look at it and you go, I'm spending half of that on media. And what am I spending on PR? 4 million, 5 million a year, maybe at the most. That's pathetic. And so PR has really failed, I think, to amplify its creative power, its storytelling power, its ability to influence and manage stakeholders, its ability to influence customer outcomes. It's too distant from customer outcomes at the end of the day. And I think the best PR people I see out there have that knack for combining creative excellence with the same language the Ernberg Basses or the Mark Ritsons use. They don't go talking about media coverage. They go talking about mental and physical availability. You know, they go use the language of the marketer, which CMOs and CEOs obviously are starting to increasingly grok, but they're able to relate it back to business performance. They're able to, and I think that's where more and more PR leaders inside businesses need to spend more time with folks who really deeply understand marketing strategy, who can help them architect their blueprint for interacting, engaging with their business.
Andy, can I ask you further to that? Do you think enough of us are driving proactive engagement with our clients? And why is that so critical? To be on the front foot?
Not even enough. And I think way too many PR practitioners I meet, both internally and externally, and I mentor a few very senior ones right now, and I keep saying to them, have you taken the CFO out to lunch? Oh yeah, I've got to get to that. No, like next week. Do it next week. Or I talk to agent leaders, they're like, oh, we're going really good with that client. We're really locked in there. And I said, you're going to get smoked in a year because that person's going to leave, a new person's going to come in. They're going to bring their favorite children in. You're going to be out because you actually haven't built relationships with the CMO, the CEO, with the chairman. You actually haven't built relationships up and down and across the business. And you look, I know what it's like. I run my businesses too. You're constrained by capacity. You're busy. You've got a lot on. It's hard to do all this stuff without necessarily sometimes pissing people off. But you've got to do it. You've got to do it. And I just believe you unlock incredible growth in your businesses. The point Chris made is right. Most PR agencies don't grow through new customer wins. They grow by expanding the revenue from within the existing client and overserving and growing the existing revenue stream within a client and doing better and bigger things for a client. You know, so I think I am incredibly optimistic about the role of comms in general, because I really believe we've entered a sort of a new era of storytelling. We've entered a new era of stakeholder engagement. We've entered a new era of issues management and crisis management. It's a new world out there. And I think communicators need to seize that opportunity and invest as much time in elevating the profession through McKinsey-esque dialogue versus sort of the puffery of the past, which does not cut it in the boardroom.
Absolutely. So, Chris, if we're going to get rid of the puffery of the past, where do you think, and you've already alluded to some of this, where do you think some of us missed the mark in the value that we can add to our clients and their businesses? Because it strikes me that you have some PR practitioners who don't sell their case particularly well about the broad remit of their skill.
Look, Leigh, I'm actually sort of paralyzed here because I realize almost everything I was going to say are the weasel words that Andy's saying we mustn't use. So I've got to have a beer with him soon and find out what are the words we do need to use now, because he used a couple and I didn't know what he was talking about, but I'm going to, he's going to coach me. I'm going to be one of the younger up and coming guys that he's going to mentor. So that's good. But no, I mean, I think more seriously, why do we miss the mark? And I think it does build on what Andy was saying, not being facetious about it. I think we use the wrong language in the way we talk to our clients. And I think we're not tapped in to the things that they are most fearful about, the things that they are most anxious about, and we're not making, we're just not pitching ourselves in the right way. Our narrative's wrong. I talk to PR companies, and they talk about stuff that they do and results that they achieve. And honestly, it's the same conversation we were having in 1984 when I was a 23-year-old intern in a PR firm in Adelaide. It's the same language, it's the same metrics. So I think the metrics are wrong. I think PR agencies have a very poor understanding about social media and what social media is today. And I don't think there is such a thing as social media. There's social and there's media, and there's completely different. And if you want to be effective in what we call social media, it's going to come through the media part of it, not the social part of it. There's a whole thing going on there that we are playing in the peripheral sandpit. Now, I am a big fan of reputation. I think it's real. I think the CEOs I talk to do take it seriously. Their shareholders take it seriously. I think there is a story in trust. I believe it. I think that we do need to, I love the definition of trust being a confident relationship with the unknown. And I think particularly with companies that are coming onto the stock market, are looking for investment, or trying to build an investable brand, reputation, trust, informed opinion are very important to that. But if any PR firm or internal team, I'd say, have a brainstorm with colleagues and work out your narrative for 2021. What's the right language to use that will resonate with the CMO? And I'd love to ask Andy a question, Leigh, if I may.
Yeah, you jump across.
So someone said to me that the role of the CMO has been extra rejuvenated, and the importance of the CMO has been given like a turbocharged boost because of COVID. That suddenly the role of the CMO, people were saying they're losing their power, and suddenly, boom, they're back front and center. Andy, is that something you've seen? Is there any validity in that position?
I think it's all just bollocks. It's the normal stuff. Like, we like to attribute, humans have an unparalleled ability to attribute events to weird things. There's no correlation, right? The CMO role hasn't fundamentally changed in decades. It's changed in its nature. It's changed in elements. But look, the CMO curve is always going through an evolution, much like any function's going through an evolution. So I don't think it has, but I do think your point earlier is a really important one that I try to make always. Like, trust is a promise kept. You earn trust. And the moment you don't keep a promise, you're done. So an interesting role is, I sat with a communicator the other day, and she was asking me some coaching and mentoring, and I said, go through that press release and highlight the implied promises. Now ask your executives how you plan to keep those promises. If those are promises you're really going to keep, or if that's just weasel word bullshit you're spinning because you want to look good.
Yeah.
Because someone at some point, an industry analyst, a financial advisor, an investor, is going to go, you said the following. Did it or didn't it happen? And that relates to everything from environmental policy to employee commitments to internal communications. And I was joking with her, like, one of the things I used to do is I used to keep the promise register when I was the chief communications officer of a very big tech firm, of all the promises we made. And then I would do an audit. And when I was sitting with CEO, I go, you're only batting about 40% on your promises. They're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, here are your promises. So far, you're batting 40%. You only kept 40% of them. And you've broken 18% of them, flat out broken them. and that's trust. That's trust as measured. So I think you've got to bring things back to real terms, and you can talk about reputation all you want. Of course we care about it. Of course we all care about reputation. We really care about it when we don't have it anymore, unfortunately. Yeah. When we've got it, we take it for granted. So you have to distill it into real terms and go, how do we influence customer experience? How do we influence and measure customer satisfaction? How do we measure NPS? Because that's actually the shit that business is actually measuring. That is actually in the bonus program for the executives, not reputation.
Yeah. And reputation that's relevant to the market.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you just go look at the executive bonus program and go, I better line up with that, because that's how they're going to get paid. That's the shit they're going to care about. So I can
and that's where, Andy, I think where a lot of, and we'll no doubt later on talk a bit about purpose, a lot of that is just bullshit too, because the executives are not incentivized or bonused around that sort of thing. It's just promises, right? Promises.
Well, purpose makes for wonderful theatre, right? It makes for wonderful internal theatre because everyone can get together and talk about things that they're not actually going to be held accountable for at any point in the future.
But does it sell units and does it put bums on seats?
Yeah, that's right. And look, there's plenty of evidence out there that purpose has absolutely zero influence over consumer purchasing behavior. Zero influence. Like you can, I'm sorry, I can show you so much research that proves it's not true, but it makes for wonderful theatre, and it sells many consulting hours. So it's not a bad thing. But I do think there is this other thing. The problem with purpose is communicators have a wonderful role to play in going, look, okay, if we're going to buy into the, the hallucinogenic drug of purpose, let's actually define what we're going to do. What's the implied promises of our purpose? Rio Tinto had a wonderful set of purposes. Look where it got them.
Yeah, that went well.
And there are plenty of other brands. It's unfair just to throw Rio under the bus because they're actually a very strong, very, very good business, very well managed. They made a terrible mistake. But as we saw, mistakes, unfortunately, aren't forgiven. They're punished.
Andy, can I ask you, if we're talking about growth, and let's talk about purpose, and let's talk about our purpose, because it feels like our industry is really subject, you alluded to it before, a bit of industry creep, with ad agencies increasingly seeing PR as just a really simple selling tool and potentially part of something that they can do. Dorothy Dixon, why is this an issue? And if we're going to grow in 2021, how do we actually stand our feet and reclaim our territory?
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is most PR agencies I meet are pretty good at creative and they don't sell it. They give it away. I just don't understand.
So when do you explain that? When you say we don't sell it, what don't we do?
Well, I'm going to say something that's probably relatively offensive to most of the PR industry, but what happens when I meet with an ad agency is, and I want to talk about creative, I've got normally 5 to 6 VPs or senior executives. I'm not sure what they do other than go to meetings and charge and bill by the hour for being in the meetings. And then beneath them is a small squadron of strategists, planners, ideation consultants, media strategists. And then beneath them is, you're about 8 levels away from anyone that actually does any work. When I go meet with a PR agency, I've got one senior principal and then a bunch of 24-year-olds who actually do shit all day long. And there's no middle ground of actual specialization. There's no actual real investment to go, actually, we're going to charge a lot of money for this creative and real creative thinking. And we're not going to pretend that we can just watch YouTube videos and TED Talks and download other people's decks and then reformat them in our template and pretend we're a brand firm. We're actually going to get people in and partner with people who can help us do this really well. And we're going to charge a lot of money for it. And as I was saying to a PR firm the other day, I said, I cannot believe you charged them, whatever it was, $30,000 or something to do that particular brand launch. Their brand agency is charging them $500,000. And all they've created is wallpaper. There's no actual go-to-market in anything they've done. They just made pretty colors and a logo, right? You're actually doing the real work, which is expressing it through storytelling and narrative, and you're charging nothing for it. It's mad.
But Andy, do you think, and not everybody's got a huge budget, do you think that we've got into this?
The communications professional doesn't have a huge budget.
Yeah.
The CMO has a really good budget normally.
Lee, I just want to, if I may add one thing to what you said about the creative agencies stepping on our toes. Some creative agencies are stepping on 5% of our industry, right? So what I mean is they are trying to play the communications marketing, the launch PR, the stunt PR game, okay? Publicity. Now, our business of public relations and what's covered by the PRIA is much wider than that. Obviously, we've got the internal comms, the issues management, the public affairs, the specialists. There's literally no one worse with worse ability to do hardcore crisis management than the guys in the creative agencies. I've seen them try it, they're completely useless, and they would just they have no idea actually what's at play. So there is one element of our business that is, I guess, almost any agent, many agencies are thinking they can play in it, and we need to get more creative, we need to be bolder, and we need to go harder against that. But let's not think that they are really a threat to the public relations industry. They're not. They're a threat to certain sectors of what we do, and they're just another competitor.
But I don't think you can allow them to capture too much of the thought leadership ground with the CMO.
Agree.
Because the CMO's budgets are big. You know, wherever I've been a CMO, I've tried to allocate more and more and more budget into PR agencies. The challenge with PR agencies as a whole is they're not effectively scalable businesses.
Yeah.
Every other element of work requires another human, whereas ad agencies are force multipliers. I can make one TV ad for many millions and deploy it into media and make many more millions. So I've got an effective model for scaling. But I'm seeing more and more of the PR agencies get very, very smart about replicating that model by using other parties in production. And, you know, they're turning people, for instance, in FMCG, they're going and they're partnering with the Shuttle Rocks of the world to do very large scale, rapid video production for social media assets. And, you know, I was talking to one the other day, and they were telling me, you know, they're working with a big FMCG firm, and they were sort of billing, you know, 15, 20K a month across one or two brands, and they're making 10x that now on social assets and rich content development of creative platforms, but they haven't added a single headcount to do it because they've partnered outside the business. So there are so many new models emerging that enable PR agencies to actually develop entirely new business models, which can really turbocharge their growth.
Andy, you talk about the relationship with the CMO and that horizontal relationship building. As we head into 2021 and everybody has an eye on growth, should that be one of the key focuses? You know, we know we do good stuff. So is it time to actually refocus on those relationships to allow us to do good stuff?
I think absolutely. And what I would encourage you to do is, in every conversation, is figure out how you don't use the word PR. Because actually a lot of CMOs and a lot of businesses don't have a PR mandate, believe it or not.
And I think the problem, sorry, Andy.
It sits over in corporate affairs or somewhere else. They don't want anything to do with it. So the trick here is to talk about customer and stakeholder engagement, product launch management, to talk about stuff that actually CMOs do and go, we enable you to do that. You know, and new audience reach and earned and owned frequency rates in audience reach, and get into stuff that CMOs get, because they go, geez, if you're telling me you can deliver me 10x my audience reach through earned and owned media platforms, then I can scale back tens of millions of dollars to spend over there, and I'll give a chunk of it over to you guys to go do your work. So I think the trick is for PR agencies and practitioners internally to go, let me help you with that. It's not about PR.
Yeah.
It's about storytelling and content and other things.
I think, and you're exactly right, nobody understands what PR actually is. And the word that goes next to it is spin, which completely belittles what we do. So changing the language.
Frankly, for most CMOs, it's absolutely terrifying. It's reputational risk.
Yeah.
So I do not want to be associated with talking to journalists from the Australian, ever. Like, it's not, no good can come from that for me. You know what I mean? I'll leave that up to you PR people and your dark arts over there in corporate affairs. Have at it. I'm just going to buy media and stay distant from the whole thing.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. Chris, again, we're focusing on growth, and we know that some areas of PR have boomed during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But for some, it's been a pretty quiet year. How do we best relaunch in 2021? How do we reconnect with clients and, you know, and get that pipeline of work humming? You know, how do you reboot?
Well, I think first and foremost, we touched on this before, but push on an open door. Okay, something Sir Martin Sorrell said in an interview recently, and I really liked it, because what it means to me is focus first and foremost on people who know you. Okay, so existing clients, you've got a 1 in 2 chance of selling something to an existing client. You've got a 1 in 4 chance of selling something to a dormant client or a client that's fired you in the past. No kidding. And you've got a 1 in 12 chance of going to find a new prospect, seducing them and making a sale, right? So focus on people that know you. And this is particularly important when we're not necessarily connecting live as much as we were. It's hard to make new relationships, to establish interpersonal chemistry and trust and those sort of things. So I would say, love the one you're with, focus on your existing clients and be patient. It's not about selling. It's about persuading and influencing, finding the problems that they've got, working on how you can help them solve that problem. Do it in bite-sized pieces, deliver some value, get the next project, get the next project. So that's number one, is I think, I call it land and expand. You land with a little project and then you gradually expand up, get your tentacles going wider into the client organization, etc. Also, look, if I was running a PR firm now, in fact, I am chairman of 3 of them, and they're all doing well because we have gateway products. And our gateway product is something that we can sell to a client that's easy to buy, that gives them an opportunity to trial us and to get in a room or get on a Zoom and have a creative session where they feel our vibe, our energy, our knowledge, our insight, our relevance to the issues that they've got. And it's sort of try before you buy, but it's a gateway product. You charge.
So, Chris, can you expand on that? What do you mean by a gateway product?
Well, a gateway product might be, I love talking to companies because generally they all love this, about their elevator pitch. Like, how do they describe who are we? What do we do? How are we different? When should you buy us? Why should you buy us? In whatever context that is, whether it's business to business or a consumer, some way getting a workshop around narrative, around messaging, around storytelling. What are the most powerful stories that we can tell in 2021 that are going to tap into emotions and persuade and influence people around what we're doing? It might be around building an investable brand. It might be about the share price of a company. It might be an employer branding proposition, or it might be around a division or a product. So those sort of workshops, messaging workshops, elevator pitch, selling. One of the little workshops that I'm developing at the moment is around training your sales force to be brilliant at selling via Zoom and via the telephone. When so let's say you're a pharmaceutical company and you're used to going into doctor's surgeries and selling. Well, how do you do it now remotely? How do you do it through other channels? How do you prepare for the, developing little products around that? So the key thing is gateway products, easy to buy one-off products that lets them see what you like, right? And it's that energy and insight that you can bring into that session. They go, you know what? I'd like more of that. I liked it. It lifted my optimism and made me believe that there was hope. So I think, so to very quickly though, Leigh, there are a couple of other things. Sure. I am a great fan of agencies being loud in 2021. The businesses I'm involved in are the loudest in their industry. They have driven their profile. They have driven their profile with relevant information that clients and prospects want to hear. They have been offering a lot of what I call, I steal everything from other more intelligent people, entertainment. So in other words, we're offering something to prospects which is going to help train them or teach them something or give them an insight, but it's also entertaining. One of the agencies I'm involved in did 87 presentations in 2 months via Zoom to prospects around behavioral science that just exploded the pipeline coming in. Entertainment. So there are other ways of connecting in, being the loudest, most distinctive agency in your space. So I think we've got to do a much better job in the way that we market ourselves. And we market ourselves by focusing on the issues of most importance to our clients. Never talk about ourselves. Talk about what they want to know the answers to and where we can try and give them some insight around that. I'm always saying to, and I'd say this to any professional in our industry, but any agency leader, find our unfair advantage. Find something that's unfair. Andy talked about Shuttle Rock. Now, if Shuttle Rock's got an unfair advantage. It's never unfair. It's only your competitors think it's unfair because they are so brilliant at what they do on, let's say, Facebook. Right, and they can create those assets that work on Facebook, even though the creative might have been done by Ogilvy or DDB. They will earn quickly, effectively, and give you results through social media channels. Unfair advantage if you're pitching against them. What's our unfair advantage? And superficial is everything. So, you know, I like to claim things, claim something, come up with a story, claim it, get out there and tell that story. The work will come. Okay, you just need to be and you need to be provocative. And Andy has always been provocative in what he's gone out and said in the market. He never talks about dog biting man. He talks about man biting dog. Right? How could he say that? Right? And he gets conversation going. And some people agree, some people don't. But boom, he's in the center of robust debate that moves the industry forward. We need to do that as well. So market your business far more strategically, but aggressively in your space with your targets in 2021. But we need to be patient. For businesses that have sort of frozen up a bit, it will come back. It'll come back in small pieces. It'll come back through keeping as close as you can to their clients and their problem. Remember, the most important thing in business is momentum. And small signs of momentum, a client calling you back, a meeting, a small project, these are all wind in the sails. Little bits of momentum are a great sign that your business is now beginning to move again. So celebrate the small steps. It doesn't have to be a big win, lots of little wins.
Andy, clearly Chris is probably the least enthusiastic person in the room, not. He does have an extraordinary energy. How important is that energy, you know, that we need to bring to our clients?
It's just so vital. And the word Chris used around momentum is everything. And I can tell you most of the stuff when you're sitting in the room with these ad agencies, you're not buying because it's the best thinking. You're not buying because it's necessarily the best strategy, but their raw enthusiasm to paint the picture is so overwhelming. You know, you just submit to it. And I don't see that enough from the PR profession. I would say that you need that energy, you need that passion, you need to be demanding about what you expect to do your best work, and you deserve it. You deserve it. I don't mean, I say 1 in 1,000 PR professionals I meet, I'm like, oh my God, do not let that person in the business. But the rest are fantastic. I think they're great people. So I just think there's this sort of underlying construct of, you know, it's time for the PR industry as a whole to really come together, restore its energy, restore its momentum, get in it together and be extraordinarily confident just about how good it is as a discipline and how important it is as a discipline, and to really coalesce shared thinking on what the profession means to a business. It's not reputation and trust, they're all great concepts, but tell me how you're going to improve customer experience. Tell me how you're going to drive engagement with passive buyers. Tell me how you're going to increase mental and physical availability. You know, tell me how you're going to reduce my media spend through accelerating earned and paid. Tell me how you can contribute to greater stakeholder engagement. So when I need my stakeholders, they're around me and with me. Don't tell me about how I can pay more money to influencers. I can do that on my own, but tell me how I can earn respect of real consumers and real influencers. Yeah. Then you're onto something big. I would say this year, though, what I increasingly say to people, I think it's been a very hard year. I think a lot of people underestimate the enormous psychological impact this year has had on both us as individuals, but also families. And I say to people, like, look after yourself, you know, and look after your people. Really figure out and understand what it takes to care for your people, care for your health, care for your business. Because I think the biggest wake-up call I had, at least in my own businesses, was just how little care I had for myself at times, and how little care I had about just, you know, it's like, oh, it's all booming, it's great, you know, dinners every night, we're out rocking and rolling, shaking things up, moving the world forward. It was all awesome. And you certainly get brought down to earth when you can't go jetting around the world and hanging with clients and doing amazing anymore. And I think that it takes a huge toll on people. And this is a young industry. Yeah. You know, it's an industry full of a lot of young people, and a lot of those people have been really impacted. So I think it's time to also reflect a little bit and go, like, what do we do to really take care of ourselves And if we can make good money, that's good. We don't have to make amazing money. That'd be nice too. But if we make good money and take care of our people, I'd argue that's a bigger win.
Yeah. I think anything that's making money of any scale is pretty good, quite frankly. I wanted to ask both of you, when we look at, and you, as you say, Andy, I think the impact of COVID-19 has made the entire community, not just the PR community, but the entire community feeling a little brittle. And, you know, the word gets bandied around a lot. You know, we talk about authenticity, but how important is that going to be in the conversations that we have with our clients and with their potential clients? Where does authenticity sit, Andy?
Look, I mean, you know, I always say to people the fundamental question is authenticity real? Because, you know, what authenticity, if we were actually all authentically ourselves every day, it'd probably not be very nice for most of us. And so authenticity is an interesting construct. What we're really, I think people mistake what we mean when we talk about authenticity, and which is stop using weasel words, stop spinning bullshit, stop obscuring information, stop calling it blue when in fact it's red. You know, stop the nonsense, for goodness sake. Write in plain English. Write like you really would talk to a human. You know, it's kind of, yeah, it's these fundamentals, and it's a really interesting thing to reflect on, because when you actually apply that acid test to how we communicate, it's not what we're doing. And I think we've got to be a lot more courageous about developing. For instance, I sat with a PR firm a few weeks ago and I said, I think I've got a really interesting little project for you. I really want you to go work on how we talk to humans. Like what are the words we use? How do we frame language and conversations? And, you know, how do we express ourselves in real ways, not authentic ways, because I think authenticity is a construct we create to pretend we're being authentic when in fact we're trying to pretend we're being something else. But how do you do that? Because I think the PR agencies don't make a lot of money out of establishing brand voice, about establishing language patterns. Republican Party spent more than $1 billion researching language patterns in the last election. How much does the average big business spend in researching its language patterns? And
is part of that point, we need to, and pardon me if this is implicit, we need to spend more time thinking about how we talk rather than how we try and sell.
Exactly. And what is the voice? What is the voice of the business? What is the language we'll use? How do we communicate efficiently and effectively? What would be our dominant mediums? Where's our media strategy from the PR firm on the dominant mediums we should be using to best influence, you know, things? And in an example, I was sitting with a PR firm I was sitting with a client reviewing a plan from a PR agency the other day. And I said, you know, I looked at it and I said, do they actually understand your average age as a solo woman traveler? Yeah. This is the PR agency. This is the brief for the solo woman traveler. I said, that's great. The average age so far of someone around this table, I think, is about 26. You're all assuming that solo woman travelers are 26-year-olds, right? And they're like, well, yeah, we are. And I said, no, the average age of a solo woman traveler is 54. All right, this is all wrong, you know, from the images through to the media targeting, through to everything's wrong. You need to go back to the drawing board. Now, that's partly the client and the marketer's fault because they didn't give them a good brief and explain it to them. But that's what authenticity is like building brands that resonate with your target audience by talking to them in the way they expect to be talked to, not in the way you want to talk. That's, I just don't think PR professionals internally or agencies are given enough respect in terms of, and enough budget in terms of their ability to think through strategy and articulate cohesive strategy.
I think a great example of a really, I'm not a big fan of the word authenticity. I sort of feel like we need to be it, stop talking about it, you know, and most clients I've ever worked with and agency people have been authentic, really. They've tried to be, but they've also got to be a lens of commercial, right? So I'll tell you a little story. There was a movie maybe 30 years ago, I think it was called Crazy People with Dudley Moore. And it's about these guys in a mental asylum. And he gets put in there by mistake, but they create an advertising agency. right? And they decide to tell the truth. So they develop an ad for Volvo, and the headline is we're boxy but we're safe.
Yeah.
Right. Now Volvo's a beautiful cars today, but 30 years ago they were boxy, right? And they had a couple of headlines for other cars that I can't repeat in a forum like this, but it was being authentic, right? It was telling the truth. You've got to balance it with commercial imperatives as well, and you need to be sensitive in the way one communicates. The most authentic communicator, I think, through the whole COVID thing was Governor Cuomo in New York. And if you watched Governor Cuomo in the way he communicated every day, he never moved away from the hard issues. He kept coming back to telling it the way it was. And I think he did a terrific service to the people of New York. He might have made some mistakes along the way, but he was a genuine, authentic communicator. And I think that's probably you do need to balance practicality with authenticity. I have to say, some of the things I said to teams in agencies I'm involved in during COVID was not authentic. If I told them the truth, I would have caused a lot of anxiety. Right. And so, I didn't tell them the full truth. So, I think the
trick is what you're getting at there, Chris, is again, I think that PR agencies and internal communicators in particular can be great custodians of as culture. And I think, I strongly recommend everyone read Hastings' latest book. He wrote about his experience in building the culture and the operating system of Netflix, because it'll give you a lot more confidence to actually have those conversations. Actually go, right, here's the map, here's what we've got to do. I think that the trick in most communications is most businesses aren't able to tell people clearly what they aim to do. So they're nervous in talking about the nature of the problem they've got. They don't want to say sales are down. And by the way, if sales don't improve in 3 months, you're all out of a job. Well, yeah, that's not a good thing. But they actually haven't thought through what the strategy is, so that doesn't happen. So I think there's this really fascinating dynamic out there that you read the Reed Hastings book. It's very, very illuminating on a business that crack the code on strategy.
Leigh, just before I forget, one thing I forgot to mention, which I think is important when we're talking about how agencies can revive in 2021. Yeah. I did talk about build our profile, which I think is a halo effect around your brand. The one thing I forgot to mention is wherever possible, if you are looking for new business, try to be introduced, okay? So, look for your microphones, your MICR phones, your most important client referrers. Andy's done this for me, where he's introduced me to someone I want to meet and set me up in the right way. Hey, you should meet Chris. He's going to contact you. He's really good at A, B, and C, and he won't waste your time. Give him half an hour. That is the most powerful way of accelerating yourself to getting the time you need with people you want to meet. Get someone they trust and respect to introduce you if you can. Sorry, Leigh, I just want to put that point on the table.
No. And I think that's very solid. Look, time's going to be against us. We only got a couple of minutes left. So I wanted to ask you, just in sort of wrapping up, Andy, everybody wants growth in 2021. Everybody's been rocked both, I think, professionally and personally during 2020. What would be a couple of your top tips to say, okay, as the clock ticks over to 2021, this is what you need to focus on to grow?
I think the first thing I'd say is growth is not accidental. It doesn't just happen. You actually need a plan. You need to create capacity. You need to dedicate time. You need to network like crazy. You need to do what Chris has said and connect like crazy. But more importantly, as you do that, you need to understand what your core value proposition is. Not the why of purpose, but the why I'm going to buy. And you need to go hunt where people have what you want. And you need to just have enormous courage. I mean, when I sit with some agencies, they say, oh, can you have a look at our new business plan and stuff? And I'm like, this is all interesting, but who do you actually want to do business with? And they're like, oh, well, we want to do business with FMCG or blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but who do you really want to do business with? But let's write their names out. Then let's go and target them, and I'll make intros and we'll go meet with them. Now, what are you going to sell them? Oh, well, and I know you don't have a process for selling. So you've got to become fanatics of the detail around the method of selling that works for you, the method of targeting, you know, I don't know why agencies sit around waiting for pitching and all that stuff. You should be ahead of that. You should be winning the business before it even hits the market. So I think it's momentum and method are my two messages there. Momentum and method. Get momentum with small steps every day. Never let go, and really define what method works best for you.
Yeah.
And figure out the why they're going to buy against the needs they might have, and test that as assumptions, hypothesis, and don't stop till you've sold something.
Sounds good.
And I think Chris had a lot of really good points up front. We call it land and expand. Don't be afraid to land small bite-sized chunks of something and expand and grow it up.
Absolutely. Start somewhere. So Chris, some final thoughts from you about the keys to growth?
Certainly everything Andy said, perfect. I think we need to convince our market that we sell growth, that we actually are going to help them grow. So to me, it's about being very focused on something I've got out of this conversation today is I need to go back to the drawing board on narrative, on vocabulary, okay, on stories. You know, Andy's, he made the comment about weasel words. I thought about it and said, yeah, okay, there is a new vocabulary. What is the vocabulary of the CMO? And the vocabulary of the CMO in a fintech is going to be different to the vocabulary of a CMO in another sort of business. So really revisiting, how do we pitch what we do, show how we can bring value and growth around the metrics they care most about in different businesses, use their vocabulary, the words they understand. And I think to me, that's critical to the way that we do grow. Think about our story, our elevator pitch, our vernacular. And my final point is, you asked Andy about energy. And I think Napoleon described leaders, you and I have discussed this before, he described leaders as dealers in hope. And for me, I think what I've been best at when I sell, and I hate selling, but I've got to do it all the time, is that I give clients and prospects hope. I give them optimism that things will be better. There is a solution. We can add value. We can help them deliver their targets. We'll help them keep their jobs and get their bonus and get the next assignment or whatever it might be. And I think we need to be dealers in hope, not only for our clients and prospects, for our teams, and to Andy's point, for ourselves.
Yeah.
Because, very often the only people whispering in our ears, energizing us, is ourselves, because we're the leaders of the business.
Well, on that note, gentlemen, can I say thank you to you both, to Andy Lark, Chris Savage. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom. I'm off to the whiteboard to start drawing out my business plan for 2021. And I just wanted to wish everyone a safe and happy Christmas and New Year, and we look forward to being with you in 2021. So to everyone, to all the PRIA members and teams, thanks so much for your
Thanks,
support.
guys. Thanks, Lee, Andy. See you later.
Stay safe. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.